The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. The air carried a tension that felt heavier than the judge's gavel itself. A frail man in a faded blue janitor uniform stood in the defendant's box, his hands clasped around a rusty keychain. The judge leaned forward, brows furrowed. "Mr. Reed," he said, voice steady but sharp, "you've been accused of stealing confidential files from the prosecutor's office. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" The old janitor looked up, his voice trembling. "Your Honor, I've been cleaning this courthouse for 25 years. I've wiped every floor where truth was spoken, and every stain left when it wasn't," the courtroom murmured. Even the prosecutor seemed unsure whether to smirk or stay silent. Judge Bennett tilted his head. "Are you suggesting something, Mr. Reed?" The janitor swallowed hard. "I'm saying the floor isn't the only thing that's dirty in this building, Your Honor." A stunned hush filled the room. Before we uncover what this janitor really found, don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Justice, where every story reminds us that truth has a voice, even when no one's listening. The judge's expression shifted from skepticism to curiosity. "What are you implying, Mr. Reed?" Samuel Reed took a deep breath, holding up his old keychain. "This key," he whispered, "opens a door none of you knew existed. And behind that door lies the evidence you've all been pretending doesn't exist." Every eye turned toward him, because for the first time in that courtroom, the man who swept the floors was about to clean the system itself. Samuel Reed wasn't supposed to be seen. He was the man who blended into the walls, whose footsteps echoed through empty hallways long after the judges, lawyers, and jurors had gone home. For most people, justice began and ended inside the courtroom. But for Samuel, it lingered in the smell of bleach, the rattle of his mop bucket, and the quiet dignity of keeping a place of law spotless. For 25 years, he'd been the courthouse janitor, showing up before dawn, leaving after midnight, never missing a day. People knew him only as Sam, the man with kind eyes and rough hands, always humming an old gospel tune as he cleaned. He wasn't educated, but he was observant, and that was what made him dangerous. Because Samuel Reed had seen things. The courthouse held secrets, and at night, when silence replaced arguments, he'd hear them all. Whispers from lawyers scheming by phone, files left open on desks, documents tossed in bins that weren't shredded. He'd noticed it all. It began a few months ago. On a Thursday evening, when Samuel was cleaning the third-floor records room, he found a folder half-buried under a pile of discarded papers labeled Case 4881, Evidence Log, Do Not Disclose. That phrase alone stopped him. The words "do not disclose" didn't belong on anything in a courthouse meant for truth. He picked it up carefully, eyes scanning the faded pages. Inside were photocopies of case records, receipts, and taped to one page a photograph. The photo showed a man he recognized, District Attorney Michael Langford, shaking hands with a construction magnate named Charles Greer. But what made Samuel's hand tremble wasn't the handshake. It was the date. The photo was time-stamped 2 days before Greer's corruption case was officially dismissed for lack of evidence. Samuel blinked. He remembered that trial well. The evidence had disappeared, the witness had recanted, and the DA had called it a failure of the system. But the system hadn't failed. It had been paid to fail. He closed the folder, slid it into his cart under cleaning rags, and told himself to forget it. He was just a janitor. It wasn't his business, but when he got home that night, he couldn't sleep. For weeks, he wrestled with his conscience. Every time he mopped the floor outside Judge Bennett's courtroom, he'd see the scales of justice carved into the wooden doors. And every time he'd wonder, what good were those scales if the people holding them had their thumbs pressing down? Then, 3 nights ago, something changed. He overheard 2 men arguing in the hallway near the file room. He recognized one voice immediately. It was Langford, the DA. "He found it, I'm telling you," the DA hissed. "That old man's been poking around where he shouldn't. You think the janitor's going to blow up your career?" Another man laughed, though there was tension in his tone. "He's harmless." "Then why did he ask me about case 4881 last week? I didn't even think he could read the damn file numbers." Samuel froze behind the corner, heart pounding. Langford continued, his voice low and venomous. "If that folder shows up again, I'll make sure he disappears faster than that evidence did." Samuel didn't wait to hear more. He knew exactly what that meant. He left his mop and cart right there in the hall and walked straight to the old maintenance room in the basement, a room no one had used for years. He unlocked it with a key that had hung on his belt since the day he was hired. Inside were shelves of tools, old cleaning supplies, and behind a broken cabinet, a small iron box. That was where he hid the folder. It wasn't about revenge. It was about peace, but peace doesn't last long when you're holding the truth. The next morning, 2 police officers knocked on his door before sunrise. They said they had a warrant for theft of government property. Samuel didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just reached for his work jacket, slipped the old keychain into his pocket, and said quietly, "I suppose even the janitor's broom can sweep up the wrong mess." Now he stood in court, the place he had cleaned for half his life, wearing handcuffs instead of gloves. The prosecutor, a young assistant under Langford, strutted confidently toward the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant was found in possession of classified evidence files belonging to the district attorney's office. The evidence suggests he intentionally stole and hid sensitive documents to tamper with an active investigation." The judge glanced toward Samuel. "Mr. Reed, is this true?" Samuel's voice was steady, but there was pain in it. "What's true, Your Honor, is that I found something I wasn't supposed to, and now I'm the one on trial for it." Judge Bennett frowned, leaning back. "You're saying the files were already misplaced?" "I'm saying they were buried, sir," Samuel replied. "And someone didn't want them dug up." A murmur spread through the room again. Langford wasn't there, which was unusual. He'd sent his assistant instead. Judge Bennett looked troubled. He'd known Samuel for years. A quiet man, always respectful. Always there when the lights turned off and the hallways went silent. "Mr. Reed," the judge said slowly, "are you suggesting corruption inside the district attorney's office?" Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "I'm not suggesting it, Your Honor, I'm living it." The judge's expression darkened. "Do you have proof of these claims?" Samuel reached into his pocket and held up his keychain. 3 keys, 1 brass, 1 silver, and 1 old and rusted. He pointed to the rusted one. "This key," he said, "opens the basement maintenance room. That's where I hid the folder. And if you open that folder, you'll find the truth nobody wanted to mop up." The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Bennett rubbed his chin. "Bailiff," he ordered, "retrieve that folder immediately." The bailiff hesitated. "Sir, the maintenance room's been locked for years." "Then unlock it," the judge snapped. As the bailiff exited the courtroom, Samuel lowered his gaze. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. Some skeptical, some sympathetic, others curious. He didn't know what would happen next. But he knew one thing for sure. Truth had a way of finding light, even through the cracks and dirty floors. And this time, it was going to shine bright. The courthouse clock struck 11, but the air in the courtroom was frozen. Every second the bailiff was gone felt like an hour. Judge Bennett tapped his gavel lightly, not in anger, but in thought. The case had already veered far from routine. A janitor accused of stealing evidence was now implying the entire district attorney's office was corrupt. And yet there was something in Samuel's eyes, not defiance, not fear, but grief, that made the judge hesitate to dismiss him. From the gallery, a reporter whispered to another, "If this old man's telling the truth, this could destroy half the city council." The prosecutor straightened his tie, masking unease. "Your Honor," he began, "we shouldn't entertain the claims of an accused thief. This man has no credibility, and his so-called key." Before he could finish, the courtroom doors opened. The bailiff entered, carrying a dusty metal box marked property storage, restricted access. He set it down on the judge's bench. "Found this exactly where Mr. Reed said it would be, sir, behind a broken cabinet in the maintenance room." A ripple of gasps swept the room. The prosecutor stiffened. "Objection, Your Honor. We have no chain of custody for this." Judge Bennett raised a hand. "Overruled. I'll determine its relevance." He carefully opened the box. Inside lay the faded folder Samuel had described, labeled Case NAR 4881, Do Not Disclose. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of papers as the judge lifted the file and began to read. The courtroom watched as Judge Bennett's face shifted, confusion, disbelief, then a quiet anger. He looked up at the prosecutor. "These documents," the judge said slowly, "appear to show that District Attorney Langford received campaign donations from a defendant whose charges were later dismissed. and that internal memos warned of legal exposure if the file resurfaced. The prosecutor swallowed. That's fabricated evidence, Your Honor. This man could have planted it. Samuel's voice rose, calm but firm. Those documents were typed on courthouse letterhead. They were stamped, signed, and stored right under your office. I didn't create corruption, son. I just swept around it. Laughter and murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Samuel took a step forward. Your Honor, I may be a janitor, but I know the smell of something rotten when I'm around it. Mr. Reed, Judge Bennett said, tone softening, you've risked your own freedom by bringing this forward. But I must ask, and why now? Why didn't you come to me sooner? Samuel hesitated, the weight of 25 years of silence pressed on his shoulders. Because I was afraid, Your Honor. Afraid no one would believe a man who scrubs toilets over a man in a suit. But when they started calling me a thief, I realized keeping quiet was the real crime. A hush fell over the courtroom. Judge Bennett exhaled, deeply troubled. Bailiff, I want these documents authenticated immediately, and someone locate District Attorney Langford. The prosecutor's voice trembled slightly. Sir, Mr. Langford is unavailable. He left town last night. The judge's brows knitted. Left town? Samuel nodded faintly. He knew this was coming. Bennett leaned back in his chair, processing everything. Mr. Reed, if these documents are legitimate, you've not only cleared your name, you've exposed a crime that reaches far beyond this courtroom. Samuel's eyes glistened. Your Honor, I didn't do this to be a hero. I just couldn't stand mopping up other people's mess while pretending justice was clean. For the first time, the gallery erupted into applause. The judge struck his gavel again. Order, order in the court. Outside, thunder rolled across the gray sky. It was as if the city itself could hear the truth echoing through the courthouse walls. Hours later, as the evidence was verified and the hearing adjourned temporarily, Judge Bennett remained behind in chambers, staring at the photographs and signatures. Every page confirmed Samuel's story. The DA's office had covered up evidence in at least 3 major cases. When the judge returned to the courtroom, he looked older somehow, weighed down by the knowledge of betrayal inside his own institution. He called Samuel forward. Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology. Samuel bowed his head. You don't owe me nothing, sir. You gave me a chance to speak. That's more than most men like me ever get. But before the hearing could close, the prosecutor rose again. His voice carried desperation now. Your Honor, I insist that the court issue an arrest warrant for Mr. Langford before any of this goes public. This could end careers. That's exactly what justice is meant to do, the judge interrupted firmly. He turned to Samuel. Mr. Reed, I'm ordering a full investigation. Until it's complete, you're free to go. A collective gasp filled the room. The handcuffs came off. Samuel rubbed his wrists, almost disbelieving the feeling of freedom. The judge smiled faintly. Mr. Reed, I hope you'll still come back to clean the courtroom after all this. Samuel chuckled softly. With all due respect, Your Honor, I think this place needs a deeper clean than my mop can handle. Laughter broke through the tension, and for the first time in months, the courthouse felt human again. As the bailiff escorted him toward the exit, a reporter approached. Mr. Reed, how did you find the courage to expose this? Samuel paused at the door, the rusty keychain dangling in his hand. Courage? He repeated. Sometimes it's not courage. It's just doing the job right, even when the job ain't yours. That night, the story spread like wildfire. The janitor who exposed the system. But while the headlines painted him as a hero, Samuel didn't see it that way. He sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the same old mop leaning against the wall. He knew the fight wasn't over. People like Langford didn't just vanish, they hid. They regrouped, they waited, and deep down, Samuel feared one thing, that the truth he'd brought to light might soon make him a target. He looked at the key again, turning it between his fingers. That key had opened a door no one wanted unlocked, and sometimes when you open a door like that, you can't close it again. It had been 3 days since Samuel Reed walked out of Judge Bennett's courtroom a free man. 3 days since the truth had cracked open the courthouse walls. And in those 3 days, Samuel hadn't slept a full hour. He sat by his window staring at the city lights flickering in the rain. Every sound, every passing car, every footstep outside made him look over his shoulder. He wasn't afraid for his life. He was afraid for the truth. Because truth he knew doesn't survive on its own. Someone always tries to bury it again. Judge Bennett arrived early that morning, his black robe folded neatly over his arm. The courthouse was quieter than usual. No reporters, no audience, just echoes of footsteps bouncing off marble floors. On his desk lay a sealed envelope marked Confidential, Internal Affairs. He opened it, scanning the first few lines. His expression darkened. It was a report confirming everything Samuel had said, the evidence tampering, the bribery, the falsified signatures. But at the bottom of the page was something that made the judge's blood run cold. Subject Langford missing. Believed to have fled with additional case files and digital backups. Bennett set the paper down slowly. He knew what that meant. If Langford still had files, he still had leverage. And that meant Samuel might not be safe. That afternoon, as thunder rolled again over the city, Samuel returned to the courthouse. Not to clean, but to thank the judge personally for believing him. He wore his old uniform, pressed and clean. The same badge that once made him invisible now made everyone stare as he walked through the hallways. When he reached the courtroom, Judge Bennett was already seated. "Reading through case notes, Mr. Reed," the judge said, looking up with a faint smile. "You shouldn't be here today." "You're a free man now," Samuel chuckled. "I know, Your Honor. But freedom don't feel right unless you face the place that tried to take it away." Before the judge could respond, the doors swung open. A voice cut through the silence. "Well, isn't this touching?" Judge Bennett looked up sharply. Standing in the doorway, soaked from the rain, was District Attorney Langford. His tie was missing, his coat disheveled, and his eyes, tired but burning with defiance. "Langford," the judge said, standing. "You have some nerve showing up here after what's been uncovered." Langford smirked. "You think you've uncovered everything, Judge? You think this old janitor's fairy tale is the full story?" Samuel stepped forward. "You destroyed good people's lives. You framed me, and now you're trying to pretend it was all a misunderstanding?" Langford's jaw tightened. "You think you're a hero, Reed? You were a nobody cleaning up other people's messes. I just made sure you stayed that way." The judge's gavel struck the bench. "That's enough." Langford laughed bitterly. "Enough? Oh, we're far from enough, Your Honor. You think the city's clean because you fired one DA? The rot goes higher than you can imagine. The mayor, the commissioners, they all had their hands in this. I took orders. I didn't invent the system, I just played my part." Judge Bennett's voice was cold and steady. "And now you'll answer for it." Langford pulled something from his coat, a flash drive. "This," he said, waving it, "is everything, the deals, the payoffs, the cases that were silenced. You expose me, this goes public. Every big name in this city will crumble." "You really want that chaos, Judge?" For a long moment, the room was silent. Rain lashed against the windows. Then Samuel spoke softly. "Sometimes the only way to clean a floor that dirty is to rip the tiles up." Langford turned toward him. "You think this makes you noble, old man? You'll die forgotten. They'll remember me before they ever remember a janitor." Samuel stepped closer. "Maybe, but I'll die knowing I did something right." Langford's hand trembled. "You think the system cares about right?" "The system chews people like you up." The judge raised his hand. "Mr. Langford, put that drive on the bench. Right now." For a second, Langford hesitated, then slammed it down. "Fine, but when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and stormed out. The door slammed. Samuel looked at the drive lying there, the small piece of metal that could bring down half the city. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "maybe you should give that to someone stronger than me to protect." Judge Bennett looked up. "Stronger than you, Mr. Reed?" "I doubt there's such a person." Samuel smiled faintly. "I appreciate that, sir." He turned to leave, but halfway to the door he stopped. His hand gripped his chest. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, alarmed. "Samuel?" The old janitor stumbled, gasping. The gavel clattered to the floor. "Call an ambulance," the judge shouted, but Samuel's knees buckled. He fell against the witness stand at the very place where his truth had saved him. Bennett rushed to his side, kneeling beside him. "Stay with me, Samuel. You did it, you cleared your name. Don't you leave me now." Samuel looked up, his breathing shallow. "Your Honor?" "Yes, I'm here. Don't let them hide it again." His fingers brushed the flash drive, then went still. The courtroom went silent. Only the rain spoke now, falling harder than before. A week later, the courtroom was full again. But Samuel Reed wasn't there. Judge Bennett stood behind the bench, holding his gavel like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Before him sat the city's press, the police chief, and the few honest officials who still believed in justice. He cleared his throat. This court convenes today not to pass judgment on the dead, but to honor the truth they gave their life to protect. He held up the flash drive. This was recovered from evidence, containing files that prove systemic corruption within the city's leadership. Because of one man's courage, the truth will not die in silence. The audience bowed their heads. Judge Bennett continued, voice steady but emotional. Samuel Reed was a janitor, a man most never noticed. But he noticed everything. And when his name was dragged through the mud, he didn't fight for revenge. He fought for justice. He paused, looking toward the empty janitor's chair in the corner of the room. Let the record show that Samuel Reed, though he entered this court as the accused, leaves it as the man who reminded us what justice means. He struck the gavel once. The sound echoed like thunder. Weeks later, the courthouse lobby bore a new plaque beside the janitor's closet. It read, "In memory of Samuel Reed, who mopped the floors of this courthouse for 25 years, and in his final days cleaned something far more important, its conscience." Judge Bennett visited often. He'd stand there quietly, staring at the brass plaque, thinking of the old man who'd changed his courtroom forever. Justice, he realized, wasn't always written in laws or verdicts. Sometimes it was written in the hands of a man who never stopped cleaning up what others left behind. As the judge turned to leave, the janitor's closet door creaked slightly open, as if the building itself remembered him. And outside, the city's bell tower rang 12 times, one for every year justice had been delayed, and one final toll for the man who refused to let it die.